You are listening to the Freedom Podcast with Van Moody. Our desire is that you begin to live in freedom every day. Freedom in your mind, freedom in your finances, freedom from the external pressures of life. Prepare to be transformed as we seek to be free, mind, body, and soul. Let's get started.
Hi friends, welcome to the Fellowship. Now today we're going to dive into the topic of manhood and marriage. The latest stats on marriage are not inspiring at all. As a matter of fact, the recent CDC report on marriage and divorce suggests that from the year 2000 to 2020, somewhere around 1.6 million people got married. But get this, almost 700,000 of them also got divorced. What this reveals is that almost half of all of the marriages ended in divorce. Now, in addition to this report, according to a recent U.S. Census Bureau stat, it suggests that 18.4 million children, which equates, if you're wondering, to 1 in 4 kids in America, live in a home without a father. So get this, that's enough kids to fill New York City twice or LA 4 times over. So almost half of all of the marriages end in divorce, and 1 in 4 kids grow up in a home without a father. These two realities are not isolated. In fact, they're connected because the common denominator in both of them are men. This is why on this episode of the Fellowship, we're going to dive into this important topic of manhood and marriage. You know, I really believe that one of the most important instructions in all of Scripture on this topic of manhood, but in particular marriage, is in Ephesians 5 and verse 25. Now in it, Paul is giving instructions to the men of the church at Ephesus on marriage. And get what he says. He says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." So peep this. Paul doesn't just tell men that we are supposed to love our wives. He actually breaks down in very clear and detailed ways how we are supposed to love our wives. He says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." The key word here is that he gave. That phrase in the Greek, or that word in particular in the Greek, is paradidomai. And paradidomai means to give up, to risk yourself, to provide for the needs of others. It literally means to sacrifice and give up your life for the needs of the other. So men, that means that we are not just supposed to love emotionally. We are supposed to love our wives sacrificially. We are supposed to love in a way that literally lays down our lives for our wives. That's the way that Jesus loved us. He didn't just love us in word. The pattern that he shows us that we are supposed to follow is that he loved us so much that he gave himself up. He sacrificed himself. Think about it. I love it when the text says that Jesus was very clear on this, that no man takes his life, but he literally laid it down for us. That's the essence of sacrificial love. And that's where real manhood comes in. Because when you think about that being the pattern, it takes a real man to love that way. A real man loves in such a way that he shoulders the needs of others and lays his life down for his spouse and for his family. That's why this issue of manhood and marriage is so important, and we got to dive into it. This is where real man talk happens, because as men, we've got to talk about this real issue so that we can make sure that not only our homes reflect it, but our children and others in the community understand what real love looks like, particularly led out by a man. So we got to dive into this conversation. My friends are here and we're going to jump into it. This is going to be good. Let's get into it on manhood and marriage. All right, fellas, so we got to talk about this. You know, that verse in Ephesians, I think is real, but a lot of times I grew up hearing it pointed more towards women. But the reality of it is, it helps us to understand that marriage is not for wimps. You know, the essence of real manhood, I think, is typified by that image that Paul paints of loving as Christ loved the church. You know, I mean, we see these images of Jesus that often I think are wimpy presentations, but to lovingly lay your life down on behalf of the other, and to be brutally beaten and treated the way he was, like, that's the essence of real manhood. And I think it gives us a great picture of how we as men have to shoulder the responsibility in marriage. And a lot of times we don't hear a lot of people talking about that.
No, not at all. You know, what's interesting is the whole idea of dying. Yeah. Like, dying is not masculine. Like, when you just gotta, like, I mean, it literally means for us in marriage, you gotta let go. And sometimes I had to learn this, you know, through much trial and error, to just, you know, it started with dying to my ideas and really just being a better listener, and then dying to my will in certain instances, and embracing her more. And it didn't feel good, especially in the early years. Oh, yeah. Like, you feel like a wimp, like, you know, as you kind of pointed out, but that's part of my journey, you know?
Yeah. I don't think we do a good job of reminding people at the wedding, which is the event, right? What their marriage is actually going to be. Yeah. You think about a traditional wedding, a groom is waiting at the altar for his bride. And we think that's like beautiful and sweet and like life-giving. We're about to spend life together. Yeah. You were at an altar.
Wow. Yeah. Sacrifice.
She came to an altar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Y'all just committed to die, not live. What happens at an altar? Death happens at an altar, not life. So everything about the institution crescendos at an altar. And then we tell people, now go live happily ever after. No, go die happily ever after. That's what real marriage is. It's death.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about the fact, though, that I think because we don't adequately prepare people, those stats that I referred to, you know, I think that's why they happen.
Yeah.
You know, because I think you got people who go into marriages, number one, not willing to die, and then they end up fighting over, I want it my way, and, you know, you want it your way, and we never sacrifice anything. And so, you know, then we wonder why many marriages end in divorce, or we wonder why many fathers are absent from the homes. I know a lot of men who just like, man, I got to go do me, thinking that that's the essence of manhood, when, you know, if we really study this passage out and understand the significance of what Paul is saying, it's like, yo, the real man has to die. For sure. And that takes a man to own up to that, because sacrifice is not easy.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, you know what? I'm thinking about my own struggle, though, as I was as a young man getting married or living through marriage. And here's the thing: I didn't have a pattern, right? That was my. I didn't have a paternal. So what? You know, I'm holding on to my feelings because that's what my mom does. Like, you know, that's what I was patterning myself for in marriage. So it was like, I was kind of like, in a sense, acting like my wife in many instances.
So let me be real. I was born into a divorce situation. Right. Literally, my mother was pregnant with me in divorce court. Wow. And so I didn't even have a chance from the beginning to see an example of a quality marriage. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, all of my aunts and uncles, you know, either were divorced or maybe a second marriage. And so the example that I had for what a godly marriage or what a husband should be, man, it's TV almost, or conversations with maybe some people at church. And I think that stunted my growth. And it was very, very rocky at the beginning of our marriage. You know, we're in year 11 now, but that was, it is not for the faint at heart, just point blank, period. And it starts with what you said, what your patterns. Mm-hmm. There was no model for me to look at. Of course, we have Christ in the example that is in Scripture, but really trying to see what that looks like in my context, I didn't have that example.
See, I actually have a great example because my parents have been married for 40 years. So they're married for 40 years. One of the things, though, I think about is what happened when I wasn't around, right? The conversations that happened after I went to bed, you know, because I think those are the times that you really get to spend that time with your wife and being able to really say, okay, we got to dive into this thing and talk about this thing. Because the other part, as you were talking about this thing about death, what kind of came up was we're afraid to die. I mean, the truth is that there's a fear in dying. If you ask anybody, nobody wants to die. There's a fear in that. And so if there's a fear in dying, then there's always like this combat in trying to save your life. But anybody who tries to save their life is going to lose it, you know? And so in this time, you know, when you're looking at your marriage, it's like, man, all the times I've been trying to fight for something when I really should have been dying to something, you know, that's what I'm thinking about in terms of that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think, Ruben, when you were talking about not having a pattern, that really resonates with me because very similarly, you know, my parents divorced when I was 6 months old. But I didn't get married until much later in life. I got married when I was 30. And, you know, I had plenty of opportunities. I just was so shook mentally because I had seen nothing but failed marriages, right? So I had a lot of baggage and stuff that I really had to work through and the Lord had to deliver me from. But sometimes I reflect on how God will teach us what to do by showing us what not to do. And, you know, my father and I have a great relationship, but I've learned a lot from his failures. And, you know, my father is approaching 80 years old and he's full of a lot of regret. And a lot of that regret is because my father lived a very selfish life. And seeing, you know, really the effects of his decisions and how he regrets so much helped me to put some things in perspective as it relates to me being a man and a father and a husband. Because the conclusion that I came to that in many ways is kind of connected to, I think, what Paul is really driving all men towards when he talks about the image of us loving as Christ loved the church, is that one of the most noblest things that I think a man can do is lay his life down for his wife and for his kids. You know, like when I think about the greatest thing that I can give my children, beyond money and beyond values and beyond, you know, wisdom, it is that I lay my life down so that their life and the life of my wife is better because of my sacrifice, right? I think that like that's the greatest thing that I can give them. And it's not easy. It is hard because there are several days that you don't want to die, right? But at the end of the day, I think that is probably one of the greatest things that we could ever give them. And I think retrospectively, my son and my daughter would say, like, my father, you know, was a real man because he gave up so much for us so that we could stand on his shoulders, so that we could reach higher. And I think if all men could embrace that, I think our families would be different. I think the impact that men have on their children would be dramatically different. And I'm gonna say something that's really radical, and I'd love for y'all to, you know, shout me down and tell me I'm crazy. But I've had some hard conversations with men that are like, yo, I just wanna jump. I just wanna bounce. I'm sick of my wife, she's tripping. And I'm like, dude, you gotta man up.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it ain't about you. It's about you laying your life down, because I think that's the essence of what Christ modeled for us.
And let's be clear about what that means too. Because it's not just paying the bills. And that was a misconception
That part.
that I had, is that, okay, you got food, you got underwear, you got a roof over your head. I did my job. No. That's not laying down your life. You know, to really lay down, your wife and your kids want your time. They want that quality time. They want for you to be interested in what they're interested in. Your wife wants you to still date her, even though y'all a decade in. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm not in these streets. Is that not good enough? Absolutely not.
No, I'm here.
Because I know what other dudes are doing, and I'm not doing that, but that's still not good enough.
It's still not good enough.
It's like this, because when you're thinking about a commitment, that's what it is. You got 2 feet in. And I feel like some people, when they get to this word, they use the word commitment, but they got 1 foot in. And think about it, I just think about it in terms of Jesus on the cross, because if he was on the cross and had 1 foot in, he would have came down. And if Jesus in that moment said, you know what, I love my people this much, I'm gonna stay here, then you have to stay. You gotta man up. You gotta be in that, and you gotta be fully committed and have both feet in.
The homie over there said this to me. I don't know if you even remember this. This was like years ago. He said this about Adam and Eve.
Oh, yeah.
He said Adam died with Eve, even though he was supposed to die for Eve.
That's correct.
You remember that?
Yes, absolutely correct.
Yeah, give us some insight on that.
Well, you know, Christ is the second man Adam for a reason. He had to do what the first man Adam did not do. That's right. And so Adam was supposed to look at Eve having bit that fruit and run to his dad and say, I know what this is going to cost her. Wow. And instead of her paying the price,
let me take it.
I'll pay it for her. That was his responsibility.
And that's what the second Adam does.
And that's what the second Adam does.
Hold up, let's pause, because if you're watching this, you better make sure that there ain't no second Adam.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, for sure.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, because the second Adam will do what the first didn't.
And how many times? How many
And his brothers are
times?
specialized in that.
Yo, how many times have there been second Adams because the first Adam didn't do his job?
Oh, absolutely.
Come on, man.
Absolutely. So you talked about that sacrifice, and I think for us as men, we have to be able to hold our value without having to hear it every 5 minutes. Because we're little boys and we need validation and all that kind of stuff. But let me put this in context to kids in particular. Your children will not be able to even comprehend the sacrifices you have made for them until like 25 or later.
Yeah.
Because their brains ain't even fully baked yet. You know what I mean? You ask your 13-year-old right now, what did you do that for? I don't know. They mean that. Psychologically, they literally don't know. So I remember being like 24 years old or something like this. And I was on the phone with my little brother, Miles. He's 17 months younger than me. And we were talking about, wait a minute, didn't Daddy work nights like our whole life? But didn't he take us to like every park in LA and took us to the mountains? We went on hikes and we started breaking everything down. Then we was like, when did he sleep? Right. We didn't know when that dude slept. He worked from like 9 at night to 9 in the morning because he was always getting overtime for the U.S. Postal Service. Then he came home and was up with us half the day. And then went to bed around 3 in the afternoon. And then my mom came home at 5. Then he went back to work at 8 to be there at night. We was like, when did this dude sleep? And then we called him. 24, not 14, right? Not age 4. 24 years old. We was like, Daddy, thank you. Yep. Yo, we don't know when you slept. Yep. We don't know how, did you drink a gallon of coffee and then take us to the mountains? Thank you so much for your sacrifice. But we have to be able to make that sacrifice even if they can't appreciate it right now. Without abusing our kids in the process of going, don't you see everything I'm doing for you? I could be asleep. Don't you know it cost me $7,000? Now I'm guilty of it. That's why I'm saying it. Right? So I'm telling you what I did. That way, hopefully y'all don't do it no more, right? Like, I'm paying $17,000 for your education and I could be on a vacation with your mom. It's like, so you penalizing me for providing?
I haven't healed from it yet. I was just being honest.
Yeah, bro.
You know, like all that we do, and of course, I mean, it's just a transparent moment. Like I think as I'm going along, I'm getting better because I look at marriage like it's dog years. Yeah. So like every year is 7 years. So I've been married for 256 dog years. That's an old dog. No, 156.
No, you won't put that on tape, bro.
I mean, my wife hears me say this because I'm like, one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, but one day with your wife is like a couple months. Like,
that's hilarious.
But I think there's something to be said. Like Tim, even listening to you are in some way, shape, or form standing on the shoulders of your father's sacrifice.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So even though our kids probably won't appreciate it until much later, I mean, the science is there and the data is clear that their lives are tangibly different when a father is present and when a father is involved. Like I tell guys, and I really believe this. I don't think that there's ever a perfect father. I don't think that there will be a perfect man, but I think when it comes to like being a husband and being a father, I think the greatest thing you can do is to be present.
Yes.
And to your point, being present involves a sacrifice.
Yes.
That's right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because like I could be out in the streets, I could be, in the home, but that mentally be checked out, not really be involved. But like the greatest thing that I think you can do is to be present, and it does require sacrifice.
It does. Yeah, my boys, so I have a 14-year-old and a soon-to-be 12-year-old. This morning, my 14-year-old comes in with his tall, lanky self, hugs his mom. I'm still laying in the bed. Your boy climbs right up on that bed and lays across my chest. It's one of the most sweet, and I'm Tom Brady with my boys. I still kiss them on the lips. Yeah. They'll be big, fat, bearded, grown men. I'll still be kissing them right on their lips like an Italian man. I feel like there is a comfort because I'm present. That's it. You know what I'm saying? Like that young man has a grown man who is there, who put his phone down, embraced him. How did you sleep? I'm not giving that up. And even, like you said, even though he can't feel the effects of it now or even appreciate it, by the time he's 30, I'm going to look his wife in the eyes and say, you're welcome.
Exactly. Exactly.
If you want to know why that boy is stable,
That's right.
because I was.
That is right.
Reason why he ain't leaving you, I didn't leave her. Right? It's a pattern. It's a pattern, man. Yeah.
It's the pattern. And the unique thing about sacrifice, though, is while it does require death and while we do give up something, what we get in return is immeasurably better. And I think the other issue that a lot of men miss is we're so short-sighted. A lot of times it's because we are so gratified oriented, like I want that quick fix, instead of thinking about the day after tomorrow. Like what is the investment that I need to make that's really going to make the impact, lasting impact that I want for my family? And I think some of it is because we didn't have the pattern. My father was short-sighted. My father didn't think about the day after tomorrow until he got late in life, and now he's full of regret, But then I think some of it is, even if you didn't have the pattern, making the decision that I want to do things different.
Yeah, man.
I want to stop this pattern of divorce or, absentee fathers, the pain of growing up without my dad. I will never forget as long as I live, but it was God's way of saying, now don't you ever do that. Like I would never, part of why I'm like radical with this whole sacrifice is because I will never allow my kids to feel what I felt. Even if, and I got a great marriage and we've been together 18 years, but like if she just goes crazy, like I will fall on the sword for my kids because that's my assignment. And that takes strength, strength of character. That's the strength that a lot of cats do. It's real easy. Let's just be real. If we wanted to just, be hoes and be out in the street, that's easy to do.
Absolutely easy. I can leave right now.
Yeah.
I can go right downstairs and be hoeing before I get to the street. It's that easy.
No need to get to the street.
Yeah, I don't even need to get to the street.
The sad part is it's true.
It's that easy.
It's that easy.
It's actually that easy.
Right.
Yeah. It don't take nothing to hoe.
It don't take no hard work.
No, it doesn't.
It don't take no sacrifice either.
No sacrifice. No.
Yeah. But that's why when we talk about real manhood, you can't be that without sacrifice.
You know what? What do y'all think, or what's your impression of this whole idea of a guy that may be watching that thinks that, well, I didn't sacrifice, I gave enough, but he doesn't really get what the boundary, that there is no boundary. I don't know about y'all. I don't know if y'all have ever had these experiences where it's like, you felt like, all right, I've given in. Now I want somebody to give in for me. And the Lord is like, no, you need to give in more. Because you're talking about you want to be like me, right?
Oh, yeah.
You get what I'm saying? Like, yo, it's like we in church, we worshiping. Oh, I want to be like Jesus, and and we run off. But then when we go home, like, yo, we not willing to go to the end of how radical God loves us. God has gone through all of these ends to love us, and we in church, woo woo woo, we worshiping and we doing the thing. But then when we go home, we're not willing to extend that same level of grace toward our spouse first, and then our children second. And it's like, yo, like it's like this. It's like it's an unending sacrifice, though. I think that's.
It's like, to me, is why do we have to quantify how much we give? Like every time that we think about it, there's like this list. There's a quantity to I give. I've done this. 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 So then you feel like you've done all of that. You checked all the boxes. Then you're done. But the truth is that God does not have, like you said, there's no boundaries to God's love. So it should be no boundaries to how much we should be giving to our family, to our wife, to our children. I mean, to our legacy. Like, we should be giving that much and more.
I think it even begs the question that if you're keeping score, is it really sacrifice?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
See Eli.
I ain't got nothing to add to that. And it thundered as soon as he said it. It was like the Lord was like, yeah, bro, no, I'm straight. I ain't got nothing to add to that.
Oh man, well listen, it's been a great conversation here. Hope that you will continue the conversation in your groups. If you haven't gotten into one of our fellowship groups, or even if you have and your groups come to an end, we're going to continue to push out great fellowship content. Get with your homeboys. Let's have the conversations to really continue to dig into the issues at the soul of every man. We've had a great time here. These are my fellas and my friends. Get with your fellas and your friends, and let's dig in. See you next time.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Freedom Podcast. For a broader range of topics, go to Van Moody's YouTube page or visit twccc.org.